I'm not going to attempt to show any slides, and I'm not going to talk for very long. Linda's excellent report and excellent talk is the main event, but I wanted to I think it's good to take the opportunity to just add some local, very local issue, and that is the fact that Hunterston, the nuclear power station, has restarted very recently. And just to remind you of the background, so the history is that Hunterston B, a nuclear power station in North Ayrshire, is one of the two oldest nuclear power stations currently operating in Europe. It was commissioned in 1976. It was originally designed with an operating life of approximately 30 to 35 years, taking it to at most 2011. And it's had permission to be extended and then extended again, but it is an advanced gas-cooled reactor, and this type of reactor is known to have a problem as it ages of cracking in the graphite blocks that form the core of the reactor. So I'm not quite sure what would happen if I tried to show my screen and show you a picture of graphite blocks, given that I'm already on my side. So I think it might be just as well to not even try. But if you imagine large barrels of graphite that are quite big structures that provide a sort of a kind of honeycomb structure, and in the center of each of these barrels is a fuel rod, the actual radioactive material that is powering the nuclear reactor. And flowing between these barrels is the gas that's cooling it all. These barrels have started to very seriously crack. Ian Fairley has written a lot about this. You can find on his blogs articles about this. And there are hundreds of cracks. And because of this cracking, both reactors, there's two reactors in this power station, Hunterston B, called Reactor 3 and Reactor 4. Both of them were stopped and required to be investigated, to have inspections, to produce safety reports, and to be offline until further investigation. And the current operator and owner, Electricity de France, EDF Energy, which is a subsidiary of Electricity de France, the French wholly government-owned power operator, they have made this safety case to the Office of Nuclear Regulation, who take the decision about whether it's safe to run or not. And despite the multiple cracks, hundreds of cracks, and actual starting to break down and produce bits of debris, despite that, they allowed both reactors to restart at the end of last month. And so now this power station is fully running, fully operational, although one of the reactors hasn't been in operation since March 2018. And this has happened, we think, primarily for economic reasons, for the benefit of EDF, but also because of the very, very powerful lobby that the nuclear industry is. And part of the reason why the nuclear industry is so powerful is because we are a nuclear armed state, and because of the connection that Linda alluded to between nuclear power and nuclear energy. Now, it's not just that historically the fuel of bombs was generated through reprocessing material from nuclear power plants, and we used to call that the deadly connection. And the UK has an enormous stockpile of plutonium that now has to be guarded 24 hours a day, and in itself costs a fortune just looking after it. But also the whole infrastructure, the training, the know-how, keeping that alive and keeping a career path alive that would help the nuclear weapons industry is made possible through the nuclear power industry. So that deadly connection is part of why the nuclear industry is such a powerful lobby in this country. So in the Scottish context, we have the oldest nuclear power station in Europe with a known problem, a known very serious problem, having been allowed to restart. And the Office of Nuclear Regulation would say safety is their main concern, but they revised their own guidelines about how many cracks were permissible to make them more lenient in response to EDF. And we don't know what other pressures there are behind the scene that have resulted in that judgment. But what we do know is that if there were to be an accident, it would be cataclysmic, because the majority of the Scottish population, of course, live downwind from Hunterston, in Glasgow and in Edinburgh and in the central belt in between. And so it's a very serious issue, but also it is partly argued for nuclear power because, as Linda alluded to, the suggestion is often made that at the point of generation of energy, it's clean, it's a carbon neutral. But Linda was talking about uranium mining and the colonialism that's been involved in that, the fact that it has involved indigenous peoples' lands being polluted. Of course, it's the same uranium mining that produces the fuel for civil nuclear power, and waste dumping also is often done in places that are where people are less able to fight back. And for example, in Australia, the Adnyamathanha Aboriginal people have just managed to fight off a nuclear waste dump in the Flinders Ranges in South Australia. So it still goes on that the nuclear industry is abusing Indigenous peoples. So the idea that it's carbon neutral cuts out the mining, it cuts out the waste, and it cuts out the construction of the power stations themselves and the enormous amounts of concrete that go into them. And concrete is a material that is a serious contributor to carbon footprint. So there is no sense in which it is carbon neutral nuclear energy, and then it's also massively expensive. But worst of all is this connection with, well, it's doubly connected with the existential threats of climate change and nuclear weapons. So I'll stop there.